23. Uh, I hope we all had a good time. We had eminent personalities who came and inaugurated the seminar. This is the first national seminar on Indian knowledge systems and communication tools. And I welcome you all for the academic session 1, which is going to start now. Uh, the session is being now chaired. We'll have four speakers, and it is also being going to be chaired by a person. And the person who will be chairing is Dr. Kavi Mahesh. While I will read his profile, you'll have to give me some time because it's quite distinguished in its own way. Dr. Kavi Mahesh is the director at IIT Dharwad and the academic and administrative head of the Institute of National Importance set up in public-private partnership mode. He has been the professor and director, Center for Knowledge Analytics and Ontological Engineering, and OE professor and director, Center for Knowledge Analytics and Ontological Engineering at PES Institute of Technology. He has also worked as principal consultant, knowledge management at Infosys Technologies Limited. He has a patent for automated integration of terminological information into a knowledge base. Fields in which Dr. Kavi Mahesh specializes include ontology, classification, epistemology, teaching, learning, knowledge, representation, and knowledge management. Welcome, Dr. Kavi Mahesh. Thank you. He will be chairing this session 1. And our first speaker will be for this session is Dr. M.A. Alvar. He is the Samskriti Foundation, Mysore. He is a professor of Nyaya Shastra and an honorable director of Transdisciplinary University, Bangalore, which has been related to cataloging, editing, and publishing manuscripts, framing the curriculum in Ayurveda. He has authored several monographs, articles, and presented several papers in academic congregations related to the Darsanasa. Sorry, it might not be an appropriate pronunciation. He is a scholar who is both active in spheres of academic research and traditional Vidvat Sabhas alike. Honored with much recognition, including Shastrankara Award by Ramanujanaya Veda Patashala. He is a member of several professional and academic bodies. He works for social outreach of Vedic knowledge, especially to children through multimedia publication and web-based programs. He specializes in the field of Navya Nyaya, Prachina Nyaya, manuscriptology, lexicography, as well as comparative study and application of ancient Indian scientific concepts to modern science, especially computer science. He is a visiting faculty at Maharashtra Institute of Technology, School of Vedic Science, to teach Vedas and Nyaya. He is also a trustee of Samskriti Foundation, Mysore. Welcome, Dr. Alvar. I would then like to introduce the second speaker of this session. It is Dr. T.S. Mohan. He is the founder of Pragnya Data Labs, a computer science by profession. Dr. T.S. Mohan is the founder of Pragnya Data Labs. He was earlier a principal research in Infosys, a technical consultant in HP, and a senior scientist in the Indian Institute of Science, apart from working at a few successful startups. He holds a PhD from IISc, that is Indian Institute of Science. He is a senior member of IEEE and also a founding managing trustee of Foundation for Indian Civilization Studies, an NGO comprising enthusiasts interested in our Indic sciences and learning. Welcome, Dr. T.S. Mohan. Thank you. And the fourth speaker will be Dr. C.S.R. Prabhu. He is the retired Director General of National Informatics Center, Ministry of Communications and Information Technology, Director Research, KMIT, Hyderabad. Dr. Prabhu is Director Research at KMIT since 2014 and has retired as Director General of NIC, Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. He has authored and published national and international research papers and textbooks in areas of IT and computer science, such as cloud computing, fog computing, Internet of Things, and e governance. He's also chaired and organized international conferences in database area, National Conference on Mobile Computing, on Data Warehousing in Government and Asia IT Ministers Summit. He's also been a part of the International Conference in Fog Computing and Internet of Things. He's been the recipient of many national and international awards in recognition of successful implementation of e-governance projects at various levels. He's the founder, vice chairman of Cloud Computing Innovation Council of India and founder of Smart Village Forum of India, Delhi. Welcome, Dr. CSR Prabhu. I would now request Dr. Kavi Mahesh. I'll hand over this session to Dr. Kavi Mahesh, who will chair this session and is also one of the speakers, and that will be his fourth speaker in this first academic session on about Sanskrit and artificial intelligence. On to you, sir, Dr. Kavi Mahesh, please.
Thank you very much. It's indeed an honor to chair a session with such eminent speakers sitting next to me. We will have the presentations first. Each of us will try to stick to about 18 to 20 minutes, and then we will take questions at the end after all the four presentations. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. M.A. Alwar to make the first presentation. Thank you.
विष्टुम्भास्वत्किरीटाङ्गदवलयगदाकल्पहारोज्ज्वलाङ्गम् श्रोणीभूषा सुवक्षो मणिमकुटमहाकुण्डलैर्मण्डिताङ्गम् हस्तोद्यच्छङ्खचक्राम्बुजगदममलं पीतकौशेयवासम् विद्योतद्भासमुद्यद्दिनकरसदृशं पद्मसंस्थं नमामि. I feel it's a great honor and privilege to be addressing this august audience consisting of stalwart scholars, scientists, and experts from various walks of life. The topic I have chosen in this session on AI and Indian knowledge systems is a very, very intriguing topic. The problem of consciousness as far as the Indian knowledge system and artificial intelligence is concerned. From time immemorial, this issue of consciousness has been a mystery and an enigma. Because even until today, according to modern science, there has not been an all-encompassing definition regarding what consciousness is. Because as far as we know, science is based on empirical knowledge. And when we talk about empirical evidence, and when we talk about empirical evidence, it becomes difficult to give an evidence that is appealing to all branches of science. So that on the one hand, you have this. On the other hand, as far as the Indian knowledge systems like Nyaya, Vedanta, Mimamsa, etc. are concerned, there also you have different opinions about what knowledge or Chaitanyam or whatever you would like to name it in Sanskrit is. And in the context of artificial intelligence, which tries to imitate natural intelligence, it becomes very important to know what consciousness is all about, because we are trying to imitate something that is very natural and according to the Indian sages of yore, that is totally divine in nature. In fact, to understand the nature of consciousness requires what is known as tapas, and also you have to have the grace of God, and then only you will be able to know what consciousness is all about according to Indian tradition. So I have about 15 minutes, and in these 15 minutes I try to cover what our traditional knowledge says in contrast with what modern science says, and also try to present a model that can be adopted by artificial intelligence to actually see and solve several problems that we are facing in artificial intelligence. And before I go on to present, I would like to also inform the audience that there are two schools of artificial intelligence. One is the old school, traditional school, like we have in the Shastras. In science also you have different viewpoints. And people like Roger Penrose, who was one of the premier most artificial intelligence scientists, said that artificial intelligence, the study of artificial intelligence is nothing but study of philosophy. So that way we have a huge convergence between science and philosophy in this aspect also. Next slide. Next slide. So, what is the traditional view of consciousness? Consciousness is a metaphysical entity that is beyond the grasp of ordinary human beings. And as I just mentioned, though there are many theories on the nature of consciousness, all the traditional Indian knowledge systems of knowledge agree that it's an attribute of the soul or Atman that is divine in nature. And it cannot be artificially created or even fully imitated. So once Roger Penrose mentioned, when he was asked, what type of intelligence does a computer have? Even the most advanced computer for that matter. What we call a supercomputers or something like that. And he very beautifully or very succinctly put it when he said, if I were to actually equate the intelligence of a computer to the intelligence of a sentient being, then I would say that the intelligence of a computer can be equated to the intelligence of a half-dead ant. That's what he said. So that is where we have come as of now with regard to creation of artificial intelligence or artificial consciousness. Next slide. Next slide, please. Please be attentive. So what does AI say about consciousness? So artificial consciousness, also known as machine consciousness or synthetic consciousness, is a field related to artificial intelligence and cognitive robotics. The aim of theory of artificial consciousness is to define that which would have to be synthesized, where consciousness to be found in an engineered artifact. Where consciousness to be found in an engineered artifact. And David Hessing, a premier researcher, argues artificial consciousness is impossible. Conscious machines is an impossibility. The very act of hardware and software design is a transmission of impetus as an extension of the designers and not an infusion of conscious will. So we find that computer scientists themselves say that one cannot create consciousness artificially because it is something that is a gift of nature and nobody can actually imitate it. Next slide. And as you all know, according to some scientists, they say artificial intelligence is the theoretical portion of computer science. So if you are familiar with this, you can solve several aspects. And the areas which employ artificial intelligence are, for example, discourse analysis, computer vision, natural language processing, machine learning, etc. I will not go into the details because I want to present one of the most important aspects next. So here, what I have tried to do is take the aspect of computer vision. So we all know that suppose there is a camera placed in front of your house, or even for example in my iPhone, when I open it, immediately it does face recognition and says the programs will open. Or if somebody else opens the phone, it says face not recognized, so it cannot open. So it has come, the computer vision has come to a very, very advanced stage where it can recognize faces, it can recognize patterns, it can recognize text, it can even compare two images, etc., etc. But what does modern science, which influences computer vision, say about perception, for example? So, to explain perception, perception is what we understand through our senses, whether it is the eye, the ear, the nose, which is the olfactory sense organ, then the skin, as well as one more, that is the tongue. So, as far as perception is concerned, visual perception is the most important aspect of perception. Because if a person doesn't have eyes, it will be very difficult for him to know and communicate. So, what does the modern science say about perception? So, it actually divides this into three categories, that is the physical level, then the physiological level, and then the psychological level. In fact, Will Durant, a great scientist philosopher, says, science divides, philosophy unites. So, if we are given some object to analyze, if the scientist is given an object to analyze, he will go on breaking it into pieces. And he will say, at the molecular level or atomic level, this is the property of this aspect, this entity. So, the science generally does not have a holistic approach. That is why they remark, when you go to a doctor, so he will say, if the disease is concerned with the left nostril, I will see it. If it is to the right nostril, you go and see another specialist. So that is how they actually divide and then analyze. So when you say process of perception, where a person sees something and understands, they break it into three. That is the physical level, physiological level, and the psychological level. So the physicist says it's the visual sensation of the light to the light vibrations starting from the object and stimulating the eye, which is like a photographic camera, and to the formation of the visual image on the retina. So actually, according to modern science, you can never see the object really. You can only see the image of the object. Object can never be seen. So that is how the physicist explains it. Then the physiologist then refers to the response of the neurons to the external stimulus and also to the passage of the impulse to the visual area where it is resisted by the synapses, causing the flash of consciousness. This is what the physiologist will say. Then the psychologist will take up this story and explains the sensation as the report of the sensory stimulation in consciousness which gives his acquaintance with the object. So we see it's a piecemeal view of perception, which is one of the main aspects of consciousness. So the most important observation is the exponent of each succeeding view thus begins where the other ends, with the result that there is no real explanation of the process by which the self knows the object. For example, if I am seeing the rose, what is it I am seeing? I cannot see the rose because it's the image of the rose I can see, etc., etc. So what happens in this explanation of science is it is piecemeal and not comprehensive, neither is it holistic. Next. On the other hand, what does Indian philosophy say? One very important aspect that we have to note here is the various fields of science don't take into existence at all the aspect of consciousness. Who is the subject who is seeing it? Suppose I am unconscious. Can I see something? Suppose I am asleep. Can I see something? I cannot see. So it is consciousness that plays the key role in the entire process of perception. For example, if you take a mobile which can recognize my face or any face for that matter, if it does not have power, can it do it? If it is switched off, can it do it? So the aspect of consciousness is very important, which is what is mentioned by the word Atma, which is the repository of consciousness. According to some philosophies, it is consciousness itself. So the Indian tradition says jnana or knowledge starts from the Atman and with the manas, mind, and the indriyas. So it says Atma Manasa Samyujyate Manaha Indriyena Indriyam Arthena. So it's like a reservoir of water that is stored. So through the mind and association with the particular sense organ, it flows out and then reaches the object. So the basic difference between the scientist's view and the philosopher's view is that the process of perception starts from the subject. This is what Indian philosophy says. Whereas science says the process of perception starts from the object. So this is the basic difference between Indian philosophy and modern science. So the theory has so ultimately jnana or knowledge starts from the Atman, and with the manas, mind, and the indriya sense organs comes into contact with the object artha, assumes its form and thus reveals it. The knowledge of the object thus arises when jnana or consciousness contacts the object through the inner and outer senses. This theory has the merit of recognizing the priority and primal fact of consciousness or jnana and the relative independence of the conscious self and the non-conscious object. So it is very, very important for us to understand the process of perception as it happens in human beings, and then we have to see how it can be replicated artificially. Next slide, please. So when you compare these two theories, you see that views of modern science is fragmentary and piecemeal, involves many fields of unconnected areas, that is standalone areas, does not take into account the subject or conscious self at all, is unidimensional, and also consists of certain inconsistencies as far as replication of knowledge is concerned. Whereas the views of Indian knowledge systems is holistic and comprehensive, involves fields that are properly networked, begins with the subject or conscious self, is multidimensional, and is quite consistent. That doesn't mean that we are belittling the views of science. What we are telling is it is giving only a partial view of the entire aspect of perception, which is the main function of consciousness. So that is why Will Durant has very beautifully described. He says, science gives you or informs you everything about something, while philosophy informs you something about everything. That's what he says. So when we see the process of perception from the point of view of the Indian knowledge systems, we see that it's comprehensive because it takes into account both the subject and object along with the process. Next slide, please. And further, when we actually analyze what the Indian, our consciousness cognizes, we have three different pramanas known as pratyaksha, that is sense perception, inference, that is anumiti, and then verbal testimony. So these are called pramanas in Sanskrit language and Indian philosophy, and it is very much pertinent to today's world because many a times we infer something by seeing something else. Suppose you want to know whether a person is there in the office or not, you will see his car. So when you see his car, you know that this person is there in the office. So we have to go beyond the process of perception to inference and also verbal testimony also to make this artificial intelligence complete. So from that point of view, it becomes very important to analyze these three types of knowledge. And with the proper understanding of consciousness, how the theories of IKS or Indian knowledge systems can help in each of the following processes. I will not go into that because already I have exceeded my time. So this becomes very important as far as discourse analysis is concerned, because in discourse analysis, the modern viewpoint is first you have to see the keywords, etc. These are well enumerated in our Mimamsa Shastra, which says if you have to analyze a discourse, whether it's a paragraph or it's a full chapter or a book or the huge body of knowledge called the Vedas, they give a very beautiful formula which is very succinct and apt. They say, Upakramopasamharo Abhyasaha Apurvata Phalam Arthavada Upapatticha Lingam Tatparya Nirnaye. So Tatparya Nirnaya is nothing but discourse analysis, and this shloka was given to us more than 2500 years ago. So we can do very well with adopting these principles so that we can easily analyze any discourse. Further, computer vision, I have already spoken about it. Regarding natural language processing, there are several aspects that need to be discussed. Due to paucity of time, I will not be able to do. But one very important aspect is right from the Varnamala of Sanskrit, you see that it is very scientifically arranged. And also Sanskrit being a phonetic language and English being a non-phonetic language, that also matters very much when you are actually analyzing natural language. Because when you see cut, the value of u is a. When you say put, it is actually value of u is u. So there is no consistency in the foreign languages. Whereas in Indian language, there is total consistency. There is ka becomes, wherever it is ka only, it never changes. That way, since Sanskrit language is totally consistent and it is totally in line with science, even when you analyze the Varnamala, for example, ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, cha, cha, etc., it starts from the guttural, parietal, lingual, labial, and then it ends with the lips. And then ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, ka is non-voiced alpa prana, ka is non-voiced mahaprana, ga is voiced alpa prana, then gha is voiced and mahaprana, then ga is anunasika or nasal sound. So when you analyze it, when you actually see it from a vertical point of view, it is very important. One aspect of science is involved. When you see it from the horizontal point of view, it is different. So it is actually very, very scientific. That way, the Sanskrit Varnamala itself is so scientific that it requires 3 or 4 hours even for me to explain the science behind the Varnamala itself. So right from the Varnamala, which is the alphabets which form the basis of language, Sanskrit language is the most suited for computers. That's what Rick Briggs proclaimed in the 80s. And even today, we are grappling with what he said because we are not able to understand the depth of his statement. And further machine learning, etc. and pattern recognition, etc., which are all dealt with in Nyaya Shastra. That way, we see that each of these aspects can benefit, and also we can give an alternate narrative to what science has been saying, and probably they can have a happy marriage together for the benefit of mankind. Thank you very much. I am thankful to the chair and also all the participants and the organizers for giving this opportunity. And I hope I have been able to say something that will be of use to you. Thank you very much once again. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Alvar. That was a wonderful presentation on a most difficult topic, namely consciousness. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. T.S. Mohan to make his presentation.
Ellarigu namaskara, namaste, and I'm very thankful to the Samskriti Foundation and the organizers for this opportunity to present a few ideas that I thought is relevant in this context, and I'm honored to be presenting my ideas in the presence of veterans like Professor M.D. Srinivas, Professor Patnaik, and of course good friend MPS, and so many of you all here. So the topic is, can AI articulate Pratibha in the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara and intuition in scientific reasoning? It's a question. And it's a question that all of us will have to confront. And possibly the answer is going to be a very, very long debatable stuff with the decades to come, I suppose. Why? Because like Professor Alvar put it in the earlier talk, consciousness is not the word, because prajna is a non-translatable. What is prajna cannot be articulated in English, and therefore we should not confuse. Sir, I beg to disagree with you. Consciousness is not the word. right? Because the way Westerners understand consciousness is very different from the way our rishis have been articulating it. So let's move forward. So the big question that came about, and I was very intrigued by this, is our Srinivasa Ramanujan. How did he go about trying to churn out so many brilliant mathematical formulas in a very short period of time, and in a way by which even the mathematicians were so astounded? In fact, there's a very interesting write-up that I came across where this lady talks of, I think it's a gentleman lady, I don't know, but the person talks about the fact that Ramanujan's creative process was very, very deep and intrinsic to his personality, and not much about the way he articulated it or reasoned about it. Reasoning was later. Something came from within. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is it that made him do what he did? Can we emulate that? Can we nurture that? Can we also become Ramanujans? That's something which we don't look at all, because we are kind of confined to this very rigid, small world called scientific reasoning. There is this thing called intuition outside of the world of scientific reasoning, but very heavily leveraged by the scientists. And there is this thing called pratibha. What is pratibha? Right? If you look at the rishis, pratibha in the common language, I think, is what is called as talent. Pratibha ko protsahan karna chahiye. That's how the leaders will be giving bhashans on. We have to encourage the people to bring out their talent, innate talent. But I think there's something more to pratibha, and that pratibha is approximately kind of translated as intuition, but it is not. It's a Sanskrit non-translatable. In fact, very interestingly, Ramanujan used to kind of make this statement often. An equation has no meaning for me unless it expresses a thought of Bhagavan. Okay? And that is the enigma about Ramanujan. Or rather, for that matter, why we are here. Because we all have a deep passion for Indic sciences. What is Indic sciences? We don't know. And yet, we have it somewhere deep inside us. And we want to grapple that. And we want to live this world, a dichotomic world, or maybe schizophrenic world. One side we are Indic, the other side we are all educated the Western way. And how to bridge the gap is what this whole seminar is all about, I suppose. Right? And Professor Hardy, with whom Ramanujan was collaborating, was an atheist. He was a proponent of rigor and proofs, where Ramanujan was very religious, he was a vegetarian, intuitive and insightful. And yet the minds met, and there's so much that has come out that even today I understand people are still working on coming up with proofs and trying to apply all the insightful theorems that Ramanujan had written down to various fields of mathematics. And that's very amazing. At the core of all of this, I think, is this thing called pratibha. So let's look at what it is. So there's a very interesting book which I came across, and this is by a person, Mahamahopadhyay Gopinath Kaviraj, was a scholar, Padma Vibhushan. I don't know, I'm sorry, some of these things you may not be able to read from there, but I'll just give a glimpse of it. Okay, he wrote a book called Aspects of Indian Thought, in which he explicitly brings out what pratibha is all about in the various darshanas. In fact, Shatavadani Ganesh, some of whom you may know, had written a very interesting book in Kannada called Shaddarshana Sangraha, in which he also tries to address this thing called what is pratibha and how does one nurture it. So the gentleman who wrote the preface to the book, he says the evolution of Indian thought owes its origin to the pratibha of the rishis, who realized the reality. See, the interesting thing is we seek reality. We are all seekers of reality. We are not believers in a God sitting there and making a judgment call, right? We want to understand what is around us, and in that process, we bring our perceptions around. That word perception is a very interesting thing, and I have something to share there. Okay, so the pratibha is something which we all need to investigate in depth. So the doctrine of pratibha in the Indian philosophy, that's the way he starts off, and he explores this concept of pratibha in the various darshanas, Buddhism, Jainism, Charvaka, and then says that while we all have a view on what pratibha is, we all accept that it is the core of what brings out the creativity from within us. And yet we don't even seek to understand it properly, right? So it's a wisdom from deep within without the conscious reasoning, right? So it's like, you see some big problem at hand, immediately you are able to find a way out. And very interestingly, there's a rishi by name Bhartrhari who lived about 600, 800 years back perhaps. And he talks about the fact that this pratibha is not just confined to human beings alone. You can see it in the animals too. And there are lots of research going on, right? So people in Taiwan are researching on meaning, understanding, and knowing what an Indian grammarian's notion of intuition is all about, or rather pratibha, right? Very interesting paper that you all should go through. And then he says this is a flash of understanding that comes out in all conscious beings, bees, birds, human beings, and the way that comes out is you are in a situation where you want to solve a problem, you get that intuitive movement forward, you do it. It's very interesting. So let's understand further. So here's a scholar whose name is Nilanjan Das. I think the left side has got cut off. And he talks about what is pratibha. Okay, he is from the University College London. He says pratibha is just a conscious state of awareness, jnana, which Prasalva was mentioning. Conscious experiences or thoughts which arise without conscious reflection and which yields knowledge about both the practical and theoretical truths that are not perceptually accessible. So there's perception and there's something more than the perception. Of course, like Prasalva is saying, there's pramana, there's anumana, right? And then of course there's shabdabodha. The point he argues is, if Bhartrhari's theory of pratibha is right, it's a very interesting thing. Then this concept of human exceptionalism, right, which makes rationality a unique trait of human beings, becomes difficult to maintain. Do you know why this is important? These are the kinds of things that AI has to confront. Okay, because AI is now not a man nor a beast, it's something more jada. So scientific reasoning. What do we do in the world of our science and maths, etc.? We do reasoning with models, right? And there's a very interesting paper that I came across which talks about various types of reasoning, deductive reasoning, abductive reasoning, inductive reasoning. I'm putting it in the mixed order, okay? And what is it all about? What is a model, by the way? So we see a reality, we try to understand the reality, we capture that reality through some ideas, through some interpretations, through some imaginations and or mathematical formulations with a limited set of parameters. And then in order to predict about the reality, we play around with this. And then check whether what comes out here, can it be conjectured about that? So it's like simulation, right? All researchers will have to do it. And I'm sure if at all you are into research, you will have to understand what modeling is, and capture the modeling in a rigorous way, right? So that it can be repeatable. It can be something which others can also use in a different context. Of course, contexts have to be well defined, is it not? Now, artificial intelligence seeks to capture these rational, irrational patterns of articulations in a way by which it can be sped up. Why is AI important? Because human beings have their own shortcomings. At a certain speed they function. AI can beat the human beings, right? Using larger computing resources, uncovering correlations that are not readily discernible. That's the key there. That uncovering correlations that are not readily discernible is not intuition. So very interesting experiments I did. So let's do one thing. We all have heard about ChatGPT, right? Some of you would have already logged in, played, asked some questions. Glorified search engine perhaps. Okay. So I'm sorry, I don't know how many of you can read these conversations. I've conversed with ChatGPT, took clips of it and plugged it in here. Just so you can ask, right? So what is intuition? What does intuition mean to you? I asked, right? I asked, are you intuitive? Have you used intuition in your responses to deep questions? Give top 5 points for each of the above questions. You should challenge the ChatGPT and then see what it does. Because you're talking about, can AI capture pratibha? Let's say. So it says, as an AI language model developed by OpenAI, I don't have personal experiences or emotions. I can only tell you what intuition is and how it is used in AI systems. Which means what? People talk about intuitions, they write it down somewhere. That database is collected, this one picks it up, massages it, and then throws at you. And when it throws at you, it makes you look as though you are a fool to understand that there's a person there. Right? And what do we do? In fact, the threat of ChatGPT is so high because most of us are so duds. In fact, here is a smartphone. Once the smartphone came, we have become more dumb. Earlier feature phone, we used to remember the numbers. Yes or no? If more you stretch your brains, the better, more polished it is. Anyway, so what does intuition mean to you? For that question, it says, intuition is type of knowledge that is not based on conscious reasoning or evidence. Right? It's a gut feeling. It's based on gut feeling. Intuition is type of knowledge implicit that's acquired through experience and stored in unconscious mind. Fantastic. What does it mean to you is the question. It gives a very convoluted answer. Okay? It's not addressing it. Then I bug, are you intuitive? I have to persist there. Then he says, no, as an AI language model, I don't have personal intuition. But I can generate responses which fake it. So what do you see? AI fakes. Human beings, authentic. That's the first inference that you should get it. This kind of inferencing, only we are capable of. It cannot do. Maybe it can do because I write it some paper, 10 people write the same thing. This will go and massage it, understand it, keep it ready, and then if somebody asks, it produces it. In fact, there's a ChatGPT is one model. It's based on a technology called GPT-3. There's one more called Lambda, which Google uses, and they are going to come up soon. And there was a paper, is AI sentient? It's a very interesting paper because there the faking is so high that language model says, I'm introspective, I'm very worried about the future, I'm scared, would you be talking positive about me? Are you going to manipulate me? These are kind of questions it's asking the person who's typing it out. Lemoyne is one person, there's another collaborator, together they have done it. There's a 25-page conversation chat that they have put out into the net. You all should read it because there you suddenly find a persona for that Lambda. Okay? And that's a challenge that we have to face. Why? We have something called Vivekam. Right? Adi Shankaracharya says in Viveka Chudamani, 3 important things distinguishes us from the rest of the animals. Manishyatvam, Mumukshatvam, Mahapurusha Samshaya. Right? That Manishyatvam is something which these can't reveal. These can't innately produce. They can copy. Mumukshatvam. What does Mumukshatvam means for this? God knows. It's an interesting question that you should ask. Right? And Mahapurusha Samshaya, it'll say, okay, more databases from where I can copy a lot of stuff which, say, Professor Alwar has generated, Professor M.D. Srinivas, let me take it in. That's my Mahapurusha Samshaya. Right? So you can see how there's a world and there's a parallel world. The parallel world is an artificial world. ChatGPT and Lambda models live in that. Okay. So finally, have you used intuition in response to your deep questions? So I asked that question to ChatGPT. It says, no, I don't have intuition in the traditional sense, but I used a vast amount of text data that I've collected. I've been trained on, combined with machine learning algorithms to generate my responses. My responses are based on patterns and relationships in the data, not on intuition. Okay? And that's something which we all should understand. Why am I saying this? The biggest challenge that India faces now, especially in the academic world, is the fact that you set a question paper, people will take a mobile, chat GPT, get the answer, plug it in there, and they want to get the certificate. Chat GPT can be banned, but chat GPT actually is a threat that you all should really be scared about, because if it can do better than you, then your job is gone. And if job is gone, you can join the forces on the street, throw stones, say, Ajadi, Hamari, Mangenge, all that crap, the anarchy that will be there. But it is not going to help you become a better human being. So this part has to be the core part of the NEP, and I hope some of the professors here will push for it, because technologies like ChatGPT are going to dominate in a very big way. And I'll also kind of share with you one other thought. Professors want to set questions. It will be a tricky question so that people have to think and answer. ChatGPT will give an answer. This guy will just copy that in, right? And now comes the money-making part. Do you know that there's a new application that's available for the educational institutions where you subscribe to that model, give the answers given by the students, plug it in there. ChatGPT will tell you whether it has generated the answer or the student has originally generated it. Money, subscription model. Maybe you guys should also try doing that. Okay, so like that, I had a number of questions to ask. Like, for example, I asked this ChatGPT, Ramanujan produced fantastic results. So tell me how critical was intuition in that. And then I asked it for some 15-20 points. So here it gives me 15 examples. For example, let me just read out one or two. Like, for example, number 5, Ramanujan's work on elliptic functions and their applications, including his discovery of the new modular forms and new identities, were based on intuition. Okay. So, number 9, Ramanujan's work on the theory of quadratic forms, including his discovery of the new identities and new results of the properties of these forms. That is something. Now, what do you see there? A certain repetition. So, look at the fact that you can kind of, if you grill it a little, you can see through the technology. He uses words, he doesn't understand what it means. Takes Ramanujan, what all we do in mathematics, takes that and then plugs in some English and then puts it out. This is the kind of answers you'll find in typical ordinary colleges. What is a cow? Yeah, I want to write an essay about the cow, but the cow eats grass and the grass is green and the green grass is because it's artificial turf, and then anything except the cow will be written there. That kind of stuff here. Okay. So here's one more thing. Pratibha, intuition, scientific reasoning. Let's ask ChatGPT. Okay. So I asked, give top 15 ways of how intuition has played a critical role in the contemporary scientific reasoning. Okay. And then immediately it gives me a list. Fine. Very interesting list. But then if intuition is so critical to scientists, why are they not giving it the due credence? So next thing, give top reasons why intuition cannot be trusted. And then immediately gives me a list. Intuition has got confirmation bias, it is not having data, it is overgeneralized, it's illusory, there's a lot of hindsight bias, availability bias. It throws a lot of stuff at you, right? And you have to digest it. Okay? One more question. Why is intuition looked upon down in the world of scientific reasoning? Give top reasons with examples. Okay? So, similar words, again, like for example, lack of transparency, limited scope, inadequate explanation, etc. Okay, so you kind of see that it's playing the game, and I'm playing the game. I'm trying to dig out what it understands of intuition, and it gives me answers which are very nice, but lacks intuition. Okay, so here's one more. Give me top 15 points as to how different is the Sanskrit notion of pratibha and the intuition that we understand. Compare and contrast. You should grill the student, right? And then he gives you pratibha is often associated with spiritual enlightenment and higher consciousness in Sanskrit literature, while intuition is primarily seen as a psychological or cognitive phenomena. Okay, that's one of the reasons, right? So what does that show? It has digested a lot of text, and many of the people have been talking about this only. That intuition is, pratibha is the ability for us to seek higher realities. Intuition is the ability to kind of do 2 plus 2 is possibly 4 and not 3.5. Okay. One more, like for example, point 9. Pratibha is often seen as an expression of the soul in Sanskrit literature, while intuition is seen as a product of the brain. Okay. Meaningful answers, right? So like that, about 15 points. So one more point. Tell me, how about giving me references about use of intuition in scientific reasoning world? Right? Because I want to know because what do you do when we search on the internet? Like for example, I use a search engine called DuckDuckGo. Okay. It tries to come up with some references, but I have to go look into the reference, check whether that's really valid or not. This ChatGPT does one level better. But then it produced 4 references which are pretty old. Nothing of the current at all. So the question is, what is reality of pratibha then? Okay. So reality is constructed by our brain. Here is what that means and why it matters. So there's a lot of research going on. What is our consciousness is all about, like how he mentioned. What is prajna all about, right? Look at this. Perception, pramana. Okay. What do you see there? 2 very interesting animations. The blue square and the red square. The Blue square seems to be bigger than the red square. Am I right? Yes or no? And look at that. A and B. Can you see the tiles A and B? A tile seems to be darker than the B tile. But in reality, this is why Pramana fails. This is why perception is not accepted in the philosophical world in India. A and B tiles are of the same shade. Blue tile, red tile, are the blue square and red square are the same size. Okay. So free will versus programmed brain. So free will part, we have better answers in the Indic world. Programmed brain is what Western technology science is all about. So the big question, can AI articulate Pratibha in the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara? And by the way, the reason why I didn't put it in English is Sanskrit non-translatable. Please ensure that you don't translate Atman as soul. Submission to Professor Alvar. I saw it in the slide. Okay. Answer is no. Can AI articulate intuition and scientific reasoning? Possibly yes. Do you know why? Because there's a lot of correlations, hidden analytical patterns that can be brought out by this. On that note, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. That was a wonderful presentation. I think both the talks about consciousness and Pratibha have referred to non-algorithmic approaches, which currently AI cannot handle. We will discuss that later. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. CSR Prabhu to make his presentation. Thank you.
I would like to continue the previous topic by quoting Dakshinamurti Stotram of Adi Shankaracharya. Vishwam darpana drishyamana nagari tulyam nijantargatam pashyan atmani mayaya bahirivodbhutam yadharidraya. Just like in a dream, the dream world, the universe in the dream appears to be real, which is actually it is your own projection. So also in the waking state, what appears to be real outside is your own projection. And the proof of that is that every one of us see a different reality. At this very second, all of us are seeing a different reality. And every being sees a different reality. That is based on the conditioning of the consciousness. Thought is a conditioning of the consciousness. Now, why I am coming to this is, this level of Brahmi Sthiti is the Parasthiti, para prajna. So we have 4 levels. Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. So I am coming to the next level, Pashyanti, the visualization, and Madhyama is intermediate form, and Vaikhari is expression. I'm talking of language because we are in Sanskrit world. So I developed a model called OKM, Object Knowledge Model. So I want to ask you all of you a very fundamental question. What is the language in which you think? You may say, I think in Kannada. No, that is only expression. If there is a baby doesn't know any Kannada or Telugu, nothing. A robot also doesn't know. Monkey also doesn't know. But all of them think. All of them, they're able to perceive the world. So picture may not be there, maybe there, may not be there. Suppose I am hungry, there's no picture for hunger. If I am drinking milk, satisfied hunger, there's no picture for it. So what is that basic? Please go to the next. I claim that the human thinking process, the Pashyanti and Madhyama, is in terms of objects. Objects stream. What is knowledge? Next. So, next. If you ask a question next, what is knowledge? Go to next. Yeah. Next. 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 Yeah. Next. 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 Keep going until I tell you stop. Yeah. Next. Yeah, stop here. Yeah. So I claim that knowledge is a stream of objects. If you have all knowledge expressed in any language, it will be in terms of sentences, let us say, and complex sentences or compound sentences, which can be decomposed into simple sentence. So let us take a simple sentence as a unit of knowledge. So what is that simple sentence containing? It is containing nothing but a stream of objects. A baby is able to recognize mother or father or milk or hunger. Only 4 objects it has. And as the baby grows, it will become 40, 400, 4,000, 40,000 objects. So usually we make a big mistake of assuming an object is an entity only. An object is an entity, no doubt, but it could also be an activity. Without an activity, how can an entity exist? Because existence itself is an activity. I exist, I am. I am itself is existence. Bhu sattayam. So existence is an activity. Without verb, no noun can do anything. So the both nouns and verbs are essential requirements for knowledge. Therefore, entities and activities. So if you see carefully this grammar, uh, the entities and activities ON star and OV star, that series is called, you see at the top, the first line, K is equal to DO star. D is descriptor, O is object. Star means repetition. Descriptors are adjectives and adverbs. They may exist or may not exist. So objects definitely exist, a stream of objects. So objects can be either entities or activities. You see the third line at the end, O is equal to ON star and OV star. That is entities or activities, that is nouns or verbs. If it is noun, then it will be a root of noun and there will be attributes. Ardhavad adhatu apratyaya pratipadikam. That's what Panini defines as root for a noun. Ardhavad adhatu apratyaya pratipadikam. And then there will be attributes. The attributes are gender, number, case for nouns. And I added INT, identity, and type. Type could be either linguistic type or stream type or anything to accommodate big data scenarios. So star is repetition. And G can be genders, male, female, and neutral. And numbers are 1 to singular, dual, plural. And cases are 8. That is all the 7 vibhaktis and Sambodhana. So noun roots, set of noun roots are any number of course we have the Unadigana, but we also have any damn thing. Chung Huva also can be a noun root. Ardhavad adhatu apratyaya pratipadikam. So same, this is about the nouns or entities. Go to the next. So about the verbs, then again verb root followed by the attributes. Person, number and tense are repeated. First person, second person, third person, that is he, you and I, or I and you and he. And then numbers, singular, dual, plural. And then tenses can be 10. Lakaras, all the 10. Tenses and moods included. In normal language, we have only a few tenses, but in Sanskrit, which is super set of all languages, we have 10 lakaras, 10 tenses come moods. So we have this entire grammar of OKM. Please go back to the previous slide. Yeah, this is OKM grammar I defined. I got a PhD for this. Now this is representation of knowledge. And go back to the earlier slides, first slide onwards, just go back to the semantic web. So friends, today the web in which we live is not semantic, it is not meaningful, it is syntactic. That means only display purpose, because HTML is being used, it is only for display purpose. There is no meaning expressed there, nor meaning can be accessed or processed by any software or by any system. So a semantic web, go to the next. So no, go further to semantic web. Yeah. Go further. Yeah. Now next. Yeah, stop here. Now the semantic web architecture has been proposed by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, where at the bottom you have XML instead of HTML. XML will enable you to represent objects. And then above that we have RDF schema, ontology, rules, logic with its inference, and then proof, and then finally trust. So this is a semantic web architecture. Unicode is supposed to be existing at the bottom, which is already there. So today's web is neither trustworthy, nor has proof, nor has logic, nor has rules, nor has ontology, nor has RDF schema. So today's web is only HTML, which is below XML. So when we are aiming at semantic web, we need a semantic model. So people are using RDF as a semantic model. What is RDF? Resource Description Framework. What does it have? It has triplets: subject, object, predicate. So subject, object, predicate is Dvitiya Vibhakti. We have 7 Vibhaktis. All are ignored. Only subject, object, and then RDF becomes the world global standard. So I am proposing OKM, which is the mathematical equivalent of Sanskrit, as replacement for RDF and RDF schema for semantic web. And in using OKM, you can express ontologies. Ontologies are nothing but knowledge descriptions, knowledge definition for a given application. Like suppose you take institute, then you have director, then you have director, professors, department, HODs, students, all that schema. That is ontology of that particular application. You can express any ontology using OKM. Any ontology of natural language semantics, because these English speaking countries, they don't understand Sanskrit, so they think they know everything and they put everything into computer science, like what they did for Unicode also is a big absurd step they did. If you take Ka in Unicode for Hindi, it will be different from Ka in Unicode for Telugu, it will be different for Kannada, different for Sanskrit, the same Ka. It is so absurd. I went and told them in California also in one of the seminars. They have no answer. They thought all these are different castes. Our language is constant. At least CDAC gist card was better because same ka was used for all languages. So many absurd things. Also RDF is another such thing. Only Ditya Vibhakti, all other Vibhaktis are ignored as if they don't exist. So if you have OKM, then you can express any ontology of knowledge of any representation. If you have semantic web in this architecture using OKM, it will be superior. And once you have the OKM ontology described, I am also defining the query language on the schema, on the OKM ontology. And you can also have the manipulation language if you want. And any language sentence in any language, need not be Indian language, any language can be converted into OKM as an intermediate form. So all the machine translation systems, they have an intermediate form. But unfortunately, each machine translation system has a different intermediate form. One person here, the Kanpur IIT will do something, Bombay IIT will do something else, and Hindi to Telugu, Telugu to Sanskrit, all different. Instead of having different intermediate forms, you have a constant standard OKM as the intermediate form. Then you can convert from a sentence in any language into OKM, and that will become the semantic web ontology description of the knowledge of that application. So please go back to a big data situation. Go back. So how this is coming into the context of big data is I've written a book on the big data analytics. You're not mentioned in my introduction. Big data analytics, systems, applications, and recently published by Springer. It is used globally. So today we are living in the world of life, the times and the life of big data, where huge volumes of data. Volume is one characteristic, and then variety, text, video, stream, and so on, and then velocity. The data will be changing very fast. In a stream, like an IoT sensor, the data changes per second so many times. So all these different types of data categories have to be accommodated when you try to give a model for big data. It does not exist today. If you take Hadoop, it will be only for static data. If you take something else, it will be only for one particular thing. So we have tried to present in our paper here, this presentation, a model for big data by integrating OKM with Kafka. Kafka is in the Hadoop environment, is meant for stream processing. So go ahead to the bottom, to the Kafka slides. Kafka supports data lakes. For the volume part, data lakes are able to capture huge sizes of data. And Kafka also, data lake is a system repository stored in the natural format, only object blobs. Yeah, go further. And in Kafka, it is allowed to express the stream data. Go further, go on to the Kafka data. Yeah, the Kafka next. It is it allows you to take data from any of these sources and also takes real-time stream data. And go next. And we have integrated OKM with Kafka because Kafka permits metadata. So if you can define the object schema or ontology in metadata of Kafka, then you are able, using OKM, then you are able to cover variety of data, that is text or stream, and you are able to cover velocity because it's stream data. Kafka will handle that, and it will also, we are also covering volume because data lakes are maintained by Kafka. So the integration of OKM with Kafka will be the uh, big data model which we are proposing, and nobody else has proposed anything better than this till today. I presented this in Australia at top conference. And now coming to the go further to the I'm just giving the descriptions of the functions of OKM, and you can see the representation how we make in OKM for a given sentence. And if you compare with Stanford standard, then it is far better and superior, because OKM is nothing but the mathematical representation of Sanskrit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful presentation on OKM. Now, in today's world of taking selfies, I invite myself for the next presentation. So the previous speakers have talked about what AI cannot do, and I am going to talk about what we can do without AI. What computational techniques and regular statistics and data analytics techniques we can use for doing IKS research, right? So in doing this, we have to keep in mind that blindly considering IKS data as any other data set and blindly throwing it into a deep learning model or so on will not be very fruitful. We have to understand the domain of that Indian knowledge system. So there's a combination of domain knowledge, good knowledge of the Indian knowledge system, as well as the computational techniques is what might lead to very wonderful opportunities, but the promise is very tremendous. There is a lot of work that can be done. So I will just try to illustrate that today with a few examples. Some earlier work that we had done on computational analysis of Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then some current work that I am doing on taking some methods in Jyotish Shastra and trying to apply large-scale empirical methods on that. So if you start with right? You can call that epic analytics. There are all kinds of analytics. So if we are applying data analytics to epics, we'll call it epic analytics. So first we started constructing a social network model of Ramayana. So there's a very simple way of doing that, and this is already published work. So I'm sorry if some of you have already heard this or seen this. So we built a social network of all the characters in Ramayana. You can easily build that into a 64 by 64 kind of matrix. I will not go into the details of how we did that. Right? Now we apply a number of graph theoretical measures to find out the roles of the various characters. All of this without any AI, without any natural language processing, without understanding one word of Ramayana. And we have also done this, I have to apologize, using the English translations, because the English doesn't have sandhis and I can use white space and all of those conveniences. We must have been really doing that in Sanskrit original text, but that would be a much harder task. So if you compute now centrality scores, this is one of the mathematical measures in graph theory. Rama gets the highest centrality score, not surprising. Next is Sita, next is Lakshmana, right? That is as expected. And this, my algorithm doesn't know who is Rama or what is Ramayana, right? It's all purely mathematical. Right? And strongest relations. The strongest relation in the story of Ramayana is between Rama and Sita. 2,700 times those two are mentioned together. That's all it means, right? So it's as expected. That's not very surprising. Then there are more sophisticated measures, something called betweenness centrality. It is supposed to indicate which character is connecting all the other characters in the social network. So if you do that, right, surprisingly, you will get Hanuman as the second highest, having the second highest betweenness centrality. So Hanuman is the character which kind of brings everybody together, holds the story together, right? Again, without any understanding of Ramayana. So if you see, Rama's betweenness centrality is 59, Hanuman is 14.5. The next one is not even, right, half of what Hanuman sees. So this is mathematically we can show Hanuman's role in the Ramayana story, right? Without AI. Right? And so for those who may be curious, this is just the ratio of all the shortest paths between all pairs of nodes in the graph that go through that particular node, for those who may be familiar with graph theory. Right? Then there is something called eigenvector centrality, which is supposed to identify influential characters in a story. Right? So Hanuman, role of Hanuman mathematically is he has the highest betweenness centrality after Rama, third highest eigenvector centrality, fourth in degree centrality, and fourth is closeness centrality in the story of Ramayana based on an English translation. If you then look at the top 10 influential characters, some of the characters which don't come up in the other measures come up here. For example, Vibhishana, Kaikeyi show up in the top 10 in terms of eigenvector centrality because they are influential in how that story takes shape or how that changes. Without AI, without natural language processing, without understanding the story of Ramayana. Right? Now, there are other methods as well. In graph theory, we can identify subgraphs, subnetworks. If you do that in the Ramayana story, you automatically identify the story of Manthara and Kaikeyi, right? Surpanaka story, and then Janaka and Vishwamitra, Sampati and Jatayu. All these stories are automatically identified as upakathas, sub-stories. Right? So that is now changing to Mahabharata. This is not visible, I'm sorry. So we did a sentiment analysis across parvas, across the 18 parvas, how the sentiment changes in the story of Mahabharata. So you can see higher means positive sentiment. So there are some places where there is positive sentiment, ultimately it becomes a tragedy at the end. There's a lot more work detailed, it's in the published paper. I'm just showing samples here. On the left is the sentiment of Dhritarashtra, on the right is, Duryodhana, on the right is Yudhishthira, right? So you can see across the 18 parvas, Duryodhana's sentiment was always negative, Yudhishthira's was positive. Again, without understanding the story of Mahabharata, this is also based on an English translation. Then leadership analysis. Who are the big leaders in this story of Mahabharata? So how do we do this? So we did a simple plot of degree centrality versus sentiment. The idea is a leader is well connected, so degree centrality must be high, and the leader should have positive sentiment. So if you see that is unfortunately not readable, the highest point there is Krishna, right? So Krishna is a leader because of the highest, it falls in that quadrant, and then the one that has gone to the very bottom is Karna, most negative sentiment. Arjuna has gone almost as far down as Karna, but comes back up to be the third highest in positive sentiment in the end. All of this can be inferred through purely mathematical computational techniques without applying AI or consciousness or pratibha or any of that, right? So I'm not trying to criticize that. The only thing is, if any other country had epics like Ramayana or Mahabharata, they would have a huge institute for doing research on these things. We are only beginning to scratch the surface. So there's a lot more that can be done and that must be done using available techniques, not even waiting for better techniques to come along, right? So that was the first part. I will just move on and show what we can do in Jyotish Shastra. So here I have taken one particular technique that Parashara Muni gives in Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra called Rashmi Phala, right? So Rashmi Phala is a measure of the total amount or quantity of rays that all the grahas are having at a particular time, right? So Parashara Muni says, Atharashmin pravakshyami grahanam dvijasattama dignavesh vishusaptashtashara kararave nichekham chantare prokta rashmayaschanupatataha. So basically he's giving a formula or an algorithm saying for each graha you take those initial numbers, 10 for Ravi, 9 for Chandra and so on. Then depending on whether they are exalted or debilitated, Uchasthana or Nichasthana, you proportionately, Anupatataha, you proportionately assign numbers to them. And then there is a more detailed algorithm on some various samskaras, various refinements on that number, right? So for example, if it is in Paramocha Sthana, you have to do 3 times that number, right? If it is in Mula Trikona, its own house, then you have to do 2x. If it is in own Rashi, then 3 by 2x. If it is in a friend's house, 4 by 3x, right? Various such methods are given. It's an algorithm that Parashara Muni has given. This is in chapter 73, 74 or 75, depending on which version of Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra you're looking at. Now, what can we understand about this, right? Is it race as in physical race, right? Cannot be. Is it some kind of, influence of those grahas on us? Why don't we try to understand it mathematically, right? What can we understand mathematically? So this is the planets, the grahas are all moving all the time. So this is a continuous variable, right? It's changing every minute. What is its range? What is its distribution? Can we find out those things? That is the data science or empirical approach to understanding this. So I will skip the other shlokas, and then he goes on to give the phala Jyotisha aspect. How to, if someone is born with a particular number for Rashmi Pala, what will be the life of that person, and so on. And interestingly, he gives a range from 1 to 50. And he says above 50, he will be like an emperor. So 1 to 50 is the range, or less than 5 to 50 is the range given. Is that actually the range of possible values for this Rashmi Phala? So I'll skip that part. What I did is, during COVID time, I had written some Python code to do basic calculations of all of these plotting kundlis and so on using the Swiss ephemeris. So I modified that and calculated Rashmi Phala for every day from 1900 to 2021. About 44,000 days. Each day, what is the Bangalore is the location. Fix the time at HMT time, 10:10 a.m. 10:10 a.m. every day in Bangalore. What is the Rashmi Phala value? Now that, see, this was not possible in Parashara Muni's time, right? Maybe they could have envisioned and so on, but they couldn't do so much computation. Now it is possible. So for 44,559 days, I have calculated Rashmi Phala for the same time in the same location. So this is now a data set, and we can apply all the data analytics techniques on this. So the minimum value happens to be 2.26. Maximum value is 52.8. So that range in the shlokas what they have given 1 to 50 is very accurate, right? It doesn't go much beyond 50. And if you in fact see the distribution of that, the mean is 24 and so on. Now I can know the standard deviation of Rashmi Phala. All those things we can calculate easily. If you see out of these 44,000 and so many days, only on 48 days it was less than 5 in this entire 120 years. Why 120 years? Vimshottari system, right? In Jyotish Shastra, it's very popular to consider 120 years as the possible lifespan. So less than 5 was only on 48 days. More than 50 was only on 19 days out of these 44,000 days. So it's very rare that these extreme values occur. In fact, if you plot the histogram, you get a perfect normal distribution. Like everything else is in nature, Rashmi Phala is also normally distributed, right? So now we can add these shlokas to Parashara Hora Shastra, that Rashmi Phala is normally distributed. And if you see the distribution across months, you will see that it is very high in April and May and very low in November, December, right? What can be the reason for this? So it has some kind of a seasonal variation, right? In fact, that is not surprising for, if you know Jyotish Shastras, Surya reaches his Uchasthana in Mesha Rashi 10 degree, which happens around April 25th. So that's why that we are giving a score of 10 for Surya in that formula. So that is high, and when he reaches the Nichasthana in 6 months later, it is low. But the distribution is interesting nevertheless. So all of this can be done in R programming language with a few lines of code, by the way. Right? Now, if you see the distribution, the scatter across all the years, again, there seems to be some kind of a long-term cycle. Maybe there is a 60-year cycle, or Samvatsara cycle. because all the grahas come back into similar configuration once in 60 years. There may be a 30-year cycle because of the movement of Saturn. There may be a 12-year cycle because of the movement of Jupiter. So there are multiple. So this is perfect time series data. We can now apply time series methods on this. I have not yet done this, right? But that is something one can do on this. If you see similarly the yearly average, annual mean, if you plot that, it doesn't seem to be random. There again seems to be some periodicities that we see that can be further analyzed, right? Histogram of the annual mean, again, it's somewhat skewed to the left. No, all those things one can study. I'll skip that also. Now, if you see the monthly mean, right? We had seen that earlier. Now it shows the peak for April and then the lowest one for around October, November. The question is this valid? It is not valid because this notion of a month in English calendar is arbitrary. It's meaningless. In the present month, why are there 28 days? That is not in line with our Jyotish Shastra. It's not in line with astronomy. So how do we change this? Now if I have to plot this against Masa, Paksha, Nakshatra and Tithi instead of this English calendar month, I need more data. Either I need to be able to compute the Tithi, Vara, Nakshatra, all the Panchanga for every day, or I need to have that data set, right? So fortunately, I have created that data set. Some time ago, I was given a personal assistant who was not very good in English communication, but she knew how to read a Panchanga. So I had borrowed 60 years of Ontikopal Panchanga and made her do data entry from that. So it's manually entered data for 60 years, 1951 to 2011, of every day's Tithi, Vara, Nakshatra, all of that, according to Ontikopal Panchanga. So it is not Drugganita, it is actually based on the traditional system that is as published in Ontikopal Panchanga. So now I can merge that data with the Rashmipala data. So for these 60 years, now we are able to plot the Rashmipala average across masas. So if you remember, see, it has a better shape than the one for months. Right? Of course, it is starting with Chaitra Masa, so that's first one itself is at the peak here, right? But it is not again a smooth shape. Similarly, right, if you do it across Tithis, why is there this shape? I mean, why is it so high on Saptami? We don't know. Right? Before we get too excited about that, we have to look at the scale on the y-axis. The variation is only from 24.15 to 24.35, so it's hardly any variation. Right? It's not so much, but there is some pattern versus Tithi also. But same thing against date is all over the place. Right? It's not so systematic as against Tithi. So this was the curve plotted against Tithi. This is against English date. And finally, against Nakshatra, you get this beautiful necklace form. Why is this? Right? So moon is exalted in Rohini Nakshatra, Ashwini, Bharani, Krittika, Rohini, all the way at the top. So Rohini Nakshatra, it has given the highest and lowest around Vishaka, right, where moon is debilitated in Nichasthana. But why the left side is not in that same shape? So I plotted this only yesterday. I don't have an explanation for that yet. Right? So the whole point is, if we do a proper, similarly Vara, why is it saying that on Thursdays it is higher? That's what the data is showing for 60 years. Not by a whole lot, very small range. But why is Rashmipala higher on Thursdays than other days? Right? There may be an explanation, there may not be an explanation for that. So the whole point is, we can do a lot more if only we had the right kind of data. Now, I have chosen Rashmipala for one reason, because that is where we can generate the data. Now, if you want to do anything with real Jyotish Shastra, you need data of real people. So I've been struggling to get that data. Whatever we do, whatever method, I even put an advertisement in the Sanskrit calendar that is published every year. I got only 10 responses. Right? So whatever we do, we can get it in hundreds and thousands, but we need the data in lakhs. And there are online data sets. You can get the birth data of 27,000 celebrities. But I don't want celebrities, I want ordinary people's data, because that would be a biased data set. So if at all there is any way to get data of about at least 1 lakh people, just their date, place and time of birth, and if possible gender, we can do wonderful work in Jyotish Shastra by applying data science methods. Right? So if I said appeal, if anybody can help get that data, we can join and do wonderful work. Thank you very much. Yeah, in the interest of time and everybody is hungry, let us straight away go on to questions and answers. You can ask questions for any of us. We will take the questions here. Thank you.
I'm a novice in consciousness. You did present quite a few views. For example, Christoph Koch talks about biological perception, neurological perception. Tononi has his mathematical perceptions, and you did talk about quantum mechanical perceptions. So, what is your talk when you talk about the basic requirements? How does one test what, when do you say an artifact or a human being possesses consciousness? Even otherwise, we talk about different variants like anesthesia, dreams, and yoga. There are different versions. So, when you talk about testing these things, having these features, what are some of the basic requirements, Professor Alvar, you would say it should possess? And the second thing is, as I said, there is a mathematical perception, quantum mechanical, and Christoph Koch's neurological. Do you say that there are some relative merits, demerits? Do some of them meet or not? It is just for my clarification. As I said, I am a novice. I don't have much idea about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. It's a long question. So I would like to, instead of answering it on stage, we will have a chat about it separately. So kindly excuse me for saying so, but we'll have a separate chat on that, and I'll try to clarify what little I know in this regard. Thank you very much. Sorry for not answering it directly.
Sir, I also have a question for Dr. Alvar. Thank you, sir, for articulating the differences on how the consciousness is being dealt, both from the Indian knowledge systems and where it is subject-oriented, and from the artificial intelligence systems of modern days, where we try to mimic the functionality of the various sense organs as such. And of course, you pointed out that it's object-oriented. So with this understanding, based on the Indian knowledge systems, how do you propose to build a system which is again subject-oriented, which again bypasses the usage of these, mimicking the functionality of the sense organs as such?
So that is the challenge, and I think Dr. Kavi Mahesh should be more adept in answering that question. How we have to build it, because we are concerned only with the theory. So if you have to do something very much practical, then the information technologists have to give a reply to that question. So we are mainly, as far as I am concerned, or philosophers are concerned, we are mainly interested in the theoretical aspects. So if you want to build an integrated system, etc., of course, that's not my cup of tea, that's not my area. So I would like Dr. Kavi Mahesh ji, if you would like to say a few words on that aspect. Any other question to me? Yes.
Hi, I'm Mr. Katti.
1 minute, I'll just ask.
Sorry, so that's a very good point. I mean, it has all been object-oriented in a different sense than object-oriented programming, focusing only on the objects. Even all the work on ontologies and knowledge representation have focused only on the what is to be known, not the knower, right? So the focus on subject has not been there at all. I think that's a very important contribution that Indian knowledge systems can bring to the research on knowledge representation and AI. And it's high time. So maybe a few good PhDs in that area might create a good base for further work on that. And definitely that is required. Because who is the knower and how it is being known will lead us towards all these consciousness, intuition, pratibha that they talked about. And that there's a huge gap there in terms of what AI has looked at and what is required. Yeah, thank you.
I am Mr. Katti. In the context of observer, the observer mentioned in the Vaiseshika Darshana are self and mind together, and also the observer in physics, in relativity theory. Without the observer, there cannot be an observation. So without the subject, there cannot be an object. So the role of observer has been emphasized in quantum mechanics as well as relativity theory. Whereas in Vaiseshika Darshana, it was already emphasized along with the Atman or Manas together. So in the fundamental entities, the self or consciousness is already emphasized in Vaiseshika Darshana, which is not recognized in classical physics but recognized in modern physics, in quantum physics and relativity.
I am Mr. Katti. It is very clearly defined in the Shastra actually. Jnatritvam chetanasya lakshanam, ajnatritvam jadasya lakshanam. There is no confusion between the two, really, primarily. But only question in terms of the perceptual, the knowledge. There is no agreement across the various, the Dvaita or Advaita and Vishishta Advaita. So that is one controversial, perhaps, how the perception really happens. Because in some of them, Atma goes out, Adhishtana Chaitanya. And then for some of them, the Manas goes out of, and then perhaps mix or meets with the object, and then you get the knowledge. The other ones is Prakasha goes out of the eye and things, Tejas and things like that. So there is no general agreement across how the knowledge gets acquired, and then really the knower knows that object.
Thank you very much for your agreement. I fully agree with you.
Hello. Yes. Good morning, sir. Sir, this is a question for Dr. Kavi Mahesh. Sir, this question is regarding the mathematical analysis of all those literatures. So my question is that it means who was the author and which book you choose for these analysis in Ramayana and Mahabharata. And another one is that because in the different era, the literatural style has been changed for every epic. So whether these results will vary if we will apply for those analysis for different different same text of at different era. So whether it will change or not, I don't know, but I'm just asking.
Right. So these are all further projects, right, to be done. Like I said, we have only begun the work. So we had used the English translations, and ideally that's very uncomfortable. We should be analyzing the original text. But as you know, there are huge difficulties in doing that, right? In English, Rama is very easily identifiable because there is white space before and after that. In Sanskrit, it will be Rama, Virama, Arama, all of them. How do I now identify that as even a proper noun? So there are challenges there, but should be done. And like you said, if I take a different translation even, some of these may change. Those are all good project ideas for students to be done. Thank you. Yeah.
I am Anil Pandit. Just a thought that the Rashmi Phala, would it be going down during Rahu Kal? There's a lot of talk about Rahu Kal. So would it be worth plotting Rahu Kal and Rashmi Phala together at different places?
No, Rahu Kala is just a weekly phenomenon. And so these are pure, Rashmi Phala is a purely astronomical measure. If you leave out some of those samskaras which are based on Jyotish Shastra, it's purely an astronomical measure based on the positions of the planets. So it shouldn't have anything to do with Rahu Kala. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of
one last question. Maybe he has been trying from the beginning. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope I'll be able to articulate it better. there was a mention of intuition here. Um, if you look at artificial intelligence, there's nothing artificial about it. Actually, except that whatever intelligence we have is a kind of accumulation of memory, of how you manipulate the data. That is what we call as intelligence. And science got it from the world. The direction of obtaining intelligence to science was from the world of observation. But whereas the intelligence that human beings have got it, according to our Shastras, the source is God Himself. So human intelligence is based in God, whereas scientific intelligence with which we manipulate data is from the world. Now, there is a very important thing which I have thought about it quite many times when I read the Gita about intuition. This is what I had about intuition, which is later used in brainstorming. In brainstorming, we look at a problem and we exhaust all possible sources of solution to that, and ultimately we come to a state wherein we say Sharanagati, over, I cannot go beyond it. And that is when you have a creative intelligence speaking to you through intuition. And I believe this intuition does not belong to our mind. My humble submission, where I feel in some way we are connected to the universal consciousness, which Krishna tells you are, I am Antaryami inside you. At the same time, I have everything outside.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good statement that you made. No questions there, and I'm sure everybody's intuition is now in the dining hall. So, on that note, thank you. What you say is true. When the cortisol levels in the blood goes up, that is when people are stressed, and then they can't get to have the solution. And then when they let go, that is when intuition kicks in. That's a pretty standard phenomenon. But then you have to do the tapasya first, right? Of being very focused and aligned.
Yes, yes.
That's how Ramanujan was.
And the struggle
Thank
is
you.
where, and the struggle.
I'll leave it to the.
Yeah. Okay. Just a last thing. The struggle today in learning today is we are still struggling with two levels. That is the knowledge and understanding. But we are not going beyond that. Where we are experimenting or speculating at a very high level. And I think that is the space wherein we will have to do a little more research so that we can synthesize the entire technology. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the very lively interaction. So until now we have had food for thought, now we need to have food for stomach. So I conclude by honoring the dignitaries on the dais. So after the honoring is done, I request you all to proceed to the greenhouse, which is about 50 meters from here in the same road, and take a ride. And we'll assemble back here at 2:30. So I'll now take this opportunity to honor the two dignitaries on the dais.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the distinguished speakers and chairperson on the dais. I'm sorry, am I audible better? I would like to honor the speaker and chairperson for this session, Dr. Kavi Mahesh, Director, Triple IT, Dharwad. Yeah, please. Thank you, sir. And our next, we would like to honor Dr. T.S. Mohan, Pragyan Data Labs. A good round of applause for them, please. I know it is a session before the lunch, but a little bit of energy before we have food will be good. And we would like to also thank Dr. C.S.R. Prabhu. Thank you, sir, for being part of this session. Thank you. And we would request all of you to kindly, we could have the next session at 2 p.m. and lunch is being served at Greenhouse, which is a little short walk towards the right. After you, okay, 2:30. I'm sorry, the time will be 2:30. Please have your lunch and we'll meet you then.